If you've had any cryptid encounters that you'd like me to share on here, email me at jttosstories@gmail.com. Story 1. A few years ago, I saw a deer man thing in the woods, and now I can't stop thinking about it. Here's the full backstory. So, from around 2010 up until 2015, I lived in this town named Mexico in Maine. My mom's family lived in a really small, like around 500 total people, town nearby called Carthage. We would go up there for a week or so every summer and chill with our family. In 2015, we ended up moving away to where my dad's family lived. Sometime in 2017, when I was 13, my mom made some plans on Facebook with some relatives, and next thing I know, we're going to Carthage for a few days. On the last day we were there, one of the kids proposed we should go for a walk. I think after a few minutes of convincing, 7 of us, including me and my sister, decided to go along, so we just told our parents and walked out. That seemed weird to me. As a kid, I never just walked out into the woods without my parents, but my sister and I just said, whatever, and we went along. After about an hour, we come across a small clearing with some fallen over trees and decide we should take a little break. The oldest of us, 15, I think at the time, had to go pee or something, so the rest of us just sat down and chatted. A minute or two later, he comes back and says we should head back now. A few kids were kind of sad, but I was pretty chunky at the time and was fine with leaving. At the time, I didn't even think about why he would so suddenly want to go back. After what felt like forever, we get to the road where the house was down the street, but I felt weird. Not frightened or worried, but off. I turned around and I saw a deer man. It was just standing there, looking at us. I stared at it for maybe a few seconds, but it felt like hours. After a second, I hear, "You coming?" from my sister, and I turned and kept walking. We get back, I get the Instagram of 2 of the other kids, and we eventually leave back home. I instantly DM the guys, and we talk for like a week, until I just kind of stopped using Instagram for a while. I forget the deer man almost immediately after, and I move on. Like 5 days ago, one of them DM'd me. We talked for a while, then he mentioned something weird in the woods. Then the memories start flooding in. We both talked to all of the other people who we could get a hold of to get everything we can straight and discussed. Here's everything we concluded about Deer Guy. It was 6 to 7 feet tall, hairy, had a head that, well, looked like a deer, antlers and all, and it had kind of a hunchback. We agree that, at the very least, it resembles the Wendigos of folklore, but I don't think that it was one. From what I know, they're linked with cannibalism, and as far as I know, none of us teenagers really had any plan on eating each other. I would like to know if anyone else has seen something similar, or if there's just a known legend in Maine that I'm in the dark about. Story 2. This happened to a friend of mine, so it's not my own story, but I wanted to share just because of its strangeness. This happened to me about 12 years ago. I was around 24 at the time. I worked hospitality, so it'd be later at night when my friends and I hung out. So, at around 9 o'clock, my friend and I decided to go for a drive. Someplace we've never been, just get in the car and, well, go. I offered, and wanted, to drive because my mother was out of town and I was using her Mercedes. It was one of those early 90s E-bodies, the ones that were big piles of heavy steel, a real tank of a car. I only mention the car body because it becomes relevant later in the story. He happily agreed, and we hit the road. We lived near Milwaukee, Wisconsin at the time. Good old Wisconsin, where you get a lot of really good stories out of, well, I've noticed, it seems to be a pretty paranormal state. Either way, we drive north out of the city, and drive for about an hour, when I see an exit I don't recognize, and decide to get off there. There was nothing at this exit other than cornfields, no gas station or restaurant signs, no visible light of a town in any direction. So we are in a place that we don't recognize, but, well, wasn't that the point? Just driving to get nowhere because the speed limit was 35 and we were in no rush. The moon was out enough that everything was pretty visible. About a mile into the cornfields, we could see two kids on the right side of the road. We comment on how weird it is because, well, there's no housing or stores or even lights on a horizon. Plus, it was 10:30ish at night. Naturally, we're two larger guys, so we don't really worry about anything. So I slow down so we can inquire if their car broke down or if they needed any help. As we pulled up, I noticed the kid in front's clothing. It was a stained, cream-colored tweed-type shirt with real tattered sleeves and overalls with only one strap. He appeared to be maybe 12 years old. The second kid was taller, wearing a flannel-type shirt with old-timey looking khaki pants. However, I could barely notice the taller kid standing further behind the smaller one because, as I pulled up and noticed the clothes, I got to see the whole quote-unquote child fully, and his arms were to his side, slightly raised, almost in that iconic zombie way. But his eyes, I couldn't take my eyes off of his, and I did my best to mutter to my friend, "You're seeing this too, right?" His eyes were pitch black, blacker than the night, but so easy to see as he stood there, just staring at us. I didn't know what on earth I was seeing, but I'd never been so frightened in my life. And I've had several odd experiences that have left me unable to deny that there's more to this world than what we understand. So we stopped for a moment, locking eyes with whatever this thing was. It was no child. It was pure evil. I've absolutely zero doubts about that. We quickly agreed to go, and fast. We are not going to inquire with him. This was straight out of the Twilight Zone. And I remembered the hitchhiker, and that was not happening tonight, no sir. So we go, and we clamor between ourselves. What did we just see? What was that? What was that? Still no signs of homes, just open cornfields. How those two kids could be there, I don't know, but I believe that those were not kids. So I keep driving, and we get out of the fields and into a wooded, windy road shortly after, probably around 5 minutes. Here in Wisconsin, there are random historical markers displaying in whatever year this happened. Type information. I only mention that because I passed one in the curve, so I glanced at it. As I'm driving through a curve going around 45 miles per hour, a creature walks in front of my car, or I guess my mom's car, and as I saw it, it was nothing like anything I ever saw. Its spine was tall, it stuck above the hood ornament as I hit it. It was a gray color, and it didn't look like anything I've ever seen. It had a very tall arch in its spine, almost like when a cat hisses and goes on its toes. That kind of shape, but in a very tall, gangly creature. I hit this thing straight on with the tank of a Benz. My friend is freaked out at this point, as am I, to say the least. I stop immediately, but now we're both a bit scared from the children of the corn, and now this thing within literally minutes of one another. We decide that getting out is not going to happen, but I decide to stay in the locked car, but use the car and its lights to see what we hit and make sure that whatever on earth that was is dead, and I really just need to know what I saw. I drive in tiny circles, backing up and forwards, looking for this creature, but after checking every inch within 100 yards, not seeing a thing, including not even a drop of blood where I hit it straight on with a Benz, making contact with its spine, body, and head anywhere. That was unnerving, and although I wanted to check my mother's car, that would be dealt with further down the road. We were not going to get out of it, so we decided to really just head home at that point. 15 minutes later, I got back to the freeway, and I needed to get out and see how bad the car was. As I got out to check, quickly, as I wasn't taking any chances that night, I noticed my grill was busted in, but really nothing too bad. So I made sure that it was secure and got back in as quietly as possible. My friend decided to stay in the car. Recently, I heard of the black-eyed kids and I freaked out a little bit, as I didn't know that they were a real thing. I thought I just saw a couple of demon kids or some ghosts. I didn't really know what to think. To this day, I've looked through tons of photos of supposed cryptid beasts and mythological creatures looking for what I hit. And the closest I've found is some Algonquin drawings of Wendigos, as they were very close to what I believe I saw and hit that night. It seems to me very odd both things could happen so close to one another and not be in some way related. Possibly it was an evil area, or possibly a ley line. I just don't know. I would like to point out, I've lived in Wisconsin a long time, and it was not a deer or a coyote or anything else. What I hit was nothing native to the known Wisconsin landscape, and neither were those horrid kids. I will never forget either of those faces, and I just hope I never come across either of them ever again. Story 3. Here's my encounter with a malnourished being near my university in the middle of the night. Any insights? So this is something that happened to me about 2 years ago at my friend's house. She lived right across a fairly busy 2-lane road from the parking lot on our college campus. I say this because the taillights in the parking lot come into play later. The house has a bay window in front of it that spans across almost the entire front side. In front of this window is a small porch without railings and a 2-person porch swing. Inside the window is the living room that has a huge sectional couch, and covering the front window is a thin purple tapestry. You can see silhouettes through it, but you can't really make out features. Her front yard is about 20 feet long with tall bushes lining the sidewalk, and the side of her property has 5 tiny evergreen-looking trees that are about 6 feet tall. Now that you have a makeshift diagram, let me explain my encounter with, well, whatever it was. The other 5 people in the house were asleep, and it was about 3:30 in the morning. I went outside to smoke a cigarette because I couldn't sleep. I'm sitting on the front swing, and I hear rustling. I figured it was just some type of animal, and I ignored it. But then I heard what sounded like something on 2 legs shuffled through the leaves on the sidewalk at a very fast pace. You can recreate the sound by doing a fast shuffle without lifting your feet off of the ground. Now, I'm alert. I think I even said, "What on earth?" out loud. So I stand up, still smoking my cigarette and looking over at the right side of the property with the tiny evergreen-esque bushes. The sound trailed from the left to the right of the property. Now, like I said, the parking lot is across the street. The tall lights are on at all hours, so it illuminates from behind, leaving me to only see silhouettes. I see something that may have been about 4 feet tall. It looked like it would have been a little shorter than my chest height. I am 5'4", and it was peeking out at me, like it was curious. But I also felt it was malicious, because I got this overwhelming sense of dread and fear. We stared at each other for what felt like a solid 3 minutes. I felt like I was in a trance. The best way to describe the thing I saw would be that it was proportionate, but malnourished. Someone once suggested that it might have been a midget. I apologize if that term is no longer politically correct, but I know for a fact that it was not. The thing was very thin and perfectly proportioned, like a thin, sickly child. I guess it kind of looked like that little guy from the Lord of the Rings movies. I think whoever sent me this story is referring to Gollum. I looked down at my cigarette for no more than a second, and when I looked back up, well, it was gone. I heard movement and I said, "Forget this," and ran inside and locked the door behind me. Then, sitting on the couch, I was staring at the window when suddenly I saw something run across, blocking a portion of the light from the parking lot as it went by. For it to do this, it had to have been on the porch where I just was. So that's basically my experience. Thank you for reading. It feels so great to get this out. I would love some insight on what you guys think. And just in case anyone believes it's an animal, the area was in southern New Jersey, fairly rural and about 10 minutes away from the Pine Barrens. I don't think it was the devil. I'm just giving out some geographical location.